Can I wish you a very happy Easter on this most wonderful day of the Christian year? It's been a strange Holy Week, and maybe today feels like a strange Easter day as we're scattered in our homes, not meeting together, but I hope you can still feel something of the joy of Easter, the joy that Christians across the world know today as we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. And I want for a few moments to think about the significance of this event, the significance of this day for us. And I want to do it by giving you, to begin with, a little bit of a quiz. And the quiz is to mention 3 dates, and you've got to try and work out what happened on these dates. So the first was May the 6th, 1954. The second is July the 20th, 1969. And the third is November the 9th, 1989. So maybe your mind is worrying right now, trying to work out whether you can remember what happened on those dates. Well, let me tell you what they were. The first is May the 6th, 1954. It was, of course, the date upon which Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. Now, everyone thought that it was impossible for human beings to run a mile in less than 4 minutes. People had tried it, but never seemed to get past that barrier. It was a barrier that no one ever thought was possible to break, and now it had been shattered once and for all. Second date, July the 20th, 1969. That was the date upon which Neil Armstrong became the first human being to walk upon the moon. And again, something that everyone thought was impossible, the idea that we could break out of our own planet, our own atmosphere, and walk upon other planets. Suddenly it was possible because it actually happened. This was a barrier, again, that no one ever thought could be broken, but now it had happened. And then thirdly, November the 9th, 1989. That was the date upon which an East German border guard called Harald Jäger opened a gate in the Berlin Wall so that thousands of people were able to flood from the old East Berlin into the West. And once the gate was open, there was no stopping it. Soon the Berlin Wall itself was dismantled. Today you can go to Berlin and you can see little bits of the wall that are still there, even a line in the streets telling you where the Berlin Wall once stood. But it's just a historical curiosity. It no longer holds the terror that it once had. The old East German regime, the GDR, held on for a few more years, but its power had gone. Now we remember those days, and in a way we commemorate them because they are days upon which everything changed. And in many ways they give us a picture of what Easter means for us, because of course Easter is not just commemorating an event in the past that has no meaning for us today. Because today is the day we celebrate the day upon which God raised a man from the dead. Now, a few years after that event, St. Paul was reflecting upon this in his letter to the Corinthians, this 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and in that letter he wrote these words: Christ has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who have died. For since death came through a human being, the resurrection has also come through a human being. For as all die in Adam, all will be made alive in Christ, but each in his own order. Christ the first fruits, then at his coming those who belong to Christ. Now let me just draw out 3 phrases from what St. Paul says there and try to help us understand what they might mean for us. Number 1, Christ has been raised from the dead. The 4-minute mile, walking on the moon, the Berlin Wall, for years we all thought they were impregnable. No one would ever break through those barriers. But Easter is a greater day for the human race than any of these. Because the one barrier that stood in front of us all was, of course, the barrier of death. This sense we have that when our lives come to an end, they end in the dead end of death, where there's no way through, where we lose everything. But that is no longer the case, because on that day, Christ was raised from the dead. It's as if he entered into death and came through the other side and revealed to us the resurrection, revealed to us what we had never seen before, what lies the other side of the grave. That the grave and death do not have the last word. Christ has been raised from the dead. Second phrase, the first fruits of those who have died. That image of the first fruits is the image of the first crocus of spring, the first apple of the season. Of course, when you see a crocus or a snowdrop in February or March, you don't just say, well, there's a crocus, a nice flower. You say spring is coming. You know that it's a sign that soon there will be many, many more crocuses and snowdrops and apples. It's the sign of many more to come. And Jesus Christ, raised from the dead, is the first man through, as it were, opening the way for others. On that day in 1954, Roger Bannister broke through the 4-minute mile, and it was only 2 months later that the next person did it, and soon loads of people were doing it. Now middle distance runners break that barrier all the time. In fact, the record today is around 3 minutes 43 seconds, 17 seconds less than Roger Bannister himself did it. When Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, he was the first to do it, but before many others did it as well. The Berlin Wall, Harold Jaeger may have been the first one through, but thousands of others followed in his wake. And in the same way, the resurrection of Jesus is significant for us, not just because he was raised from the dead, but because you and I can be raised from the dead if our faith is placed in him. And then the last thing, the last enemy to be overcome is death. Death is the last enemy, the greatest enemy of the human race. If that is overcome, everything else can be overcome. So that whatever it is we are facing, none of it ultimately stands against the power of God who raises the dead. We are in the middle of a global pandemic right now that spreads fear and anxiety around, fear for ourselves, our health, our loved ones, our future, our economy, and so on. But in the light of the resurrection of Jesus, if death is overcome, the last enemy of come, not even coronavirus can stand against the power of the God who raises the dead. Now, Christian faith, of course, doesn't say to us that bad things won't happen, doesn't give us security against illness or sickness or even dying one day. But it does say that none of these are anything ultimately to be afraid of, because the power of God is greater. Easter gives us hope. Human beings were never meant to live without hope. In fact, to live in despair is not to really live at all. And the good news of this day is that hope is possible whatever you and I fear, whatever you and I face. In our Easter liturgy, we have that phrase picked up from St. Paul where he says, "Death, where is your sting?" When I go to football, there's this moment that often happens in football crowds when the opposition maybe score first and then you equalise. And when that happens, what happens is the crowd sing towards the opposition, "You're not singing anymore." And that's exactly what the church says when it says, "Death, where is your sting?" Death, you have no more power over us. You have no song to sing against us, because instead of the song of death, we have the song of Jesus Christ, risen from the dead. Because Jesus is risen, there is literally nothing to be afraid of. And that is the good news of Easter Day.